Friends, I decided to build into my homily the time you would usually spend on driving to church and from it. Here's a story from the headlines that all of you will remember. In March 2019, the FBI announced the completion of Operation Varsity Blues, a nationwide scam in which wealthy parents paid outrageous bribes to get their children into prestigious colleges like Yale and Stanford. 50 people were charged in the scandal, including parents, test administrators, and college coaches who all collaborated in getting unqualified students admitted to big-name schools. In addition to the bribes, the folks involved in this scandal falsified test scores on the ACT and SAT exams, made up fake awards and honors on the students' college applications, paid professionals to take tests or attend classes for the students, and put the students on college athletic teams for which the students had no actual athletic experience. Some parents even photoshopped their kids' faces over the bodies of professional athletes to make it look like their kids had real athletic experience. Comedian Trevor Noah from The Daily Show had one of the best jokes about this scandal. Some of these parents allegedly paid up to $6.5 million, he said, which is insane. Honestly, for that amount of money, just buy a smarter kid. My friends, it's easy to make fun of people who seem to have privileges. Did they earn them? Do they deserve them? Because we obviously deserve all the blessings we have in our lives, don't we? We've worked for them. We're good people. And that earns us some good karma, right? We get angry if people suggest that we benefit from some unearned privilege. But we do. Let's change the conversation for a minute. What do you think would be the most difficult aspect of being born blind? What would you miss out on? What would you need help with? How do you think other people would treat you? I want you to think about that as we read the opening words to today's gospel passage. As Jesus went along, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" There it is again, the issue of earning our privileges, deserving our blessings, has been around a long time. The underlying belief here is that all of life should be just and happy and under our control, so injustice and suffering must have a root cause. We must deserve it in some way. Because if the blind man didn't deserve his disability, then we don't deserve our ability. We don't deserve our blessings and comfort and safety and health and happiness if he didn't deserve his blindness. And if none of us deserves our lot in life, then none of us can boast or complain if our lot in life changes. Whether we win or lose, we don't deserve either state. Nancy Iceland, Associate Professor of Sociology of Religion at Emory University, has written, "Growing up with a disability, I could not accept the traditional interpretations of disability that I heard in prayers, in Sunday school, and in sermons. You are special in God's eyes, I was often told. That's why you were given this painful disability. Or don't worry about your suffering now. In heaven, you will be made whole." This confused me. My disability had taught me who I am and who God is. What would it mean to be without this knowledge? My family frequented faith healers with me in tow. I was never healed. People ask about my hidden sins, but they must have been so well hidden that even I misplaced them. The theology that I heard was inadequate to my experience. Sometimes our ideas about what makes life worthwhile, about what we deserve, about what constitutes a blessing from God, stand in the way of us understanding God and living a life of meaning and purpose. This is one of the most important questions of human existence. Why was this man blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Notice that there are two acts of healing in these 4 verses. There is, of course, the physical healing. What a great joy and blessing this man received because he stepped out in faith. He received his sight. But I think the first act of healing occurred when the blind man heard Jesus say, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." Jesus' statement gave the man hope and healed his sense that his disability was somehow a curse that made him a lesser man. A professor in the field of management has said something profound about suffering. There is some pain that needs a solution and some pain that needs a story. In this moment, Jesus gave the blind man both a solution, physical healing, and a story, that he was not disabled by some sin that either his parents or he had committed. I want us to focus on that fact today because all of us carry around heavy pains during these days of pandemic and quarantine for which we don't seem to see a solution. An unanswered prayer, an undeserved burden. We beg God for a solution. What if God gives us a story instead? I think the first part of this story would be that God can use every part of your life for His glory. Not only does God know all your bad news, God can use all your bad news. God is most glorified in the way we handle our suffering. Our blessings don't draw people to God. No one is in awe of a healthy, smart person who achieves great things. We are in awe of those who overcome hard times, who choose joy in the face of sorrow, who choose love in the face of hardship. So every blessing and every hardship, every strength and every disability, every joy and every sorrow in our lives is an opportunity for God to work out His plan through us. Does that mean that God plans everything that happens to us? No, I don't believe so. There is suffering that comes from the sins of others, like abuse or neglect. There is suffering that comes from impersonal forces outside our control, like dividing cancer cells or coronavirus or recession. God did not intend for us to endure this suffering. He does intend to work through this suffering to strengthen us and make us better able to demonstrate His glory in all circumstances. People need to see the power of God in how we handle our suffering. The formerly blind man's story is a story of hope and love and life and grace. It's the story of what Jesus did in him, and he refused to be silenced by the fear tactics of the Pharisees, as we refuse to be people of fear and anxiety in the face of this pandemic. And the final part of our story is that we never know who needs to hear God's story through you and I. There's a beautiful story on the Divine Opportunities blog by a man named Larry. Many years ago, Larry was driving down Highway 240 in Memphis when he saw a car pulled off on the side of the highway. He felt strongly that God was leading him to stop and help. He pulled up behind the stopped car and saw a young woman standing by the side of the road, staring off into space. When he asked if she needed help, she began to cry. This young mother had just come from St. Jude's Children's Hospital, where her 2-year-old son was undergoing treatments for leukemia. Her husband had walked out on the family not long after their child's diagnosis. And this flat tire on the side of the road in Memphis felt like the final straw for this young woman. She felt so lost and alone. Larry didn't have a solution for this woman, but he did have a story. He knew now why he had felt the urge to stop. 8.5 years earlier, when Larry's little son was just 2 years old, Larry's wife had died of leukemia. He knew what it was to be grief-stricken and confused. He knew what it was to be a single parent. He knew what it was to feel alone and helpless and desperate. And he knew what it was to rely on God for his strength. And so Larry began sharing the story of how God worked through his grief and anger and loneliness. He shared how God had helped him to be a single parent to his little son. As Larry wrote in the blog, it was a God thing. I don't recall a lot of what I said. It's like it came in and went out, a lot like a gift of the Spirit. It's not necessarily something I thought about and said. It just flowed. Larry sat with the woman while she cried. Then he changed her tire and prayed with her. And when Larry drove away that day, he understood in a new way how God had used his pain to bring comfort and strength to someone else in need. As the professor said, there is some pain that needs a solution and some pain that needs a story. You may never get an answer to your why, so change the question to, how can God use this? We ask God for a reason. God gives us a purpose. In this lifetime, you may never get a solution to your pain. You may never see how God is using it, but if you give your pain to God, you can have a new story. It will be the story of how God is glorified in our weakness, not in our strength. God is glorified in our perseverance more than our power. God is glorified more by our attitudes than by our achievements. And God is using our pain to grow us into people who reflect His glory and draw others to Him. We are all going through an extremely difficult time now. When I say all, I mean the entire world. Our faith continues to give us hope. We know that this will pass. What will our story be? Will we talk about empty shelves in the grocery stores, lack of cleaning supplies and toilet paper, and how we fought over? Or is our story going to be one of love, hope, altruism, compassion, generosity of spirit and action, support for one another? What will our story be?